Welcome back to Education Matters. Did you correctly answer true? Students can repay their forgivable loan twice as fast if they choose to teach in a low-performing public school. Joining us now to discuss what is hot and happening in education news are two of the best reporters in education in North Carolina.
Thank you.
We have Lisa Phillip, who is an education reporter at WUNC Radio, and Kelly Hinchcliffe, education reporter, WREL News. Thank you both for coming today. All right, so I keep up with everything that you cover, but tell me a little bit about what are some of the recent things. I'll start with you, Kelly. What have you been covering? Sort of what's been, other than, I guess you've been covering the lawsuits between the state board and the superintendent a lot.
Yes, for the past year, I've been covering the ongoing lawsuit between the state board and new state superintendent Mark Johnson. And actually that lawsuit was filed last December, so we're coming up on the one-year anniversary of it. And basically, for people who might not know, it's basically a power struggle between the two of who has control of our state's public school system. You're talking about a $10 billion school system with 1.5 million students, and each wants to be able to control the budget, to be able to control who is hired and fired at the Department of Public Instruction. So we've been following that very closely.
What about you, Lisa? What's been, from your perch, you've been covering a lot of things happening in Chapel Hill. I know that I just read a couple of stories about the Silent Sam fight, as that was one of the things.
Right. I recently started covering the UNC system, particularly the Board of Governors. You've probably noticed people have been paying a lot of attention to that board these past few months just because of sort of an increasing tendency for the board to reach down into campuses and take actions more seen as micromanaging, I guess, than they have been seen in the past. And with the Silent Sam sort of controversy that also rose in recent months, it's a Confederate monument on campus that a lot of students and faculty have come out in protest and have requested that it be removed.
Yeah, I think the School of Ed and some others, I mean, they just released something this week.
Yes.
In fact, you may recall, we had President Spellings on the week of Charlottesville, right when all that was first sort of spinning up. But yeah, that's been, what else has been going on? What else have you been covering?
So I've been recently doing some reporting on just the lack of teacher diversity in the state. I was just recently aired a story about the fact that the 80% of the teachers in North Carolina are white, and I wanted to explore some of the causes for this, and spoke with the executive director of the NCAACP and had some interesting conversations about how Black and Latino students are feeling in classrooms and how that impacts their feelings towards going into teaching, because there are disparities in school discipline and teacher expectations for minority students. The teaching profession isn't necessarily something that they want to go into.
Well, that raises an interesting question for you and for both of you. How do you decide on a story like that? A story like that, that's something that's more of a trend. It's sort of something you're sort of watching and seeing, whereas things are kind of breaking news. How do you decide on what you think is the viewers want to hear? Do they let you know?
Yes, they let us know. I think one of the most read stories probably this year was the school performance grades. People want to know, how is my school doing specifically? But one of the nice things about my job that WRAL allows me to do is to really spend more time digging into stories. I was able to spend several months working on a story about the state's virtual charter schools, the 2 new virtual charter schools. So that's something we'll be following. They're on a 4-year pilot program to see if they can succeed in this state. So that's one of the things that we're continuing to follow.
Right. What about you? What are you working? You got anything you can preview? Anything? any breaking news? You can break it right here.
I don't know about breaking news right at this moment. I don't know if my editor would be too happy if I did that. But I've been looking, especially into this teacher diversity issue, into doing some more stories on that, just in terms of the challenges facing Black males specifically in the teaching profession. That's one thing I've been looking at. And as Kelly mentioned, the nice thing about working for WUNC is the same. I get sort of the space and time to work on more in-depth stories. And another thing I'll be looking at is the Read to Achieve program and sort of the things that need to happen for a student to be successful in terms of reading at grade level in the 3rd grade, but really starting at birth. What needs to happen before a student even gets to school and to kindergarten.
A question for you. I talked to you right after you came to WUNC. You had moved here from Maryland.
That's right.
Is the education landscape issues different here in North Carolina from what you were covering there?
So I was covering a pretty well-off county in between DC and Baltimore. So there were a lot of federal workers there. There was a pretty big tax base for the schools. And also, it was one of those counties where people were moving there to send their kids to school there. But despite that, the school system still dealt with some of the same issues like equity. Equity was huge there. I mean, you would think that it wouldn't be a problem just because there are more resources to sort of address these issues. But when I was there, the school system started publishing discipline data, and it turned out that Black students were being suspended 7 times more frequently than white students. So that system was dealing, as much of Maryland is, despite the level of resources they have in comparison to this state, they're still dealing with these issues of equity.
Right. Last question for you, Kelly. If people follow you on Twitter, they may have seen you as a records geek.
Records geek, and a lot of people think that I collect music records.
But I don't.
No.
But it's about public
records.
information records.
Right.
What role do public, like finding public information out, play into your job?
Huge part. I think that it's one of the most useful tools that a reporter has is filing public records requests, trying to find documents and data that can help shine a light on some of the things that you're looking into. And one of the important things is these are not my records. It's not just for reporters to request. The public can request them. Anybody can. And I just want to say that I think that we're talking about stories and listening to Lisa and thinking about we have such a strong education reporters in this state.
Well, we appreciate.
And I'm just glad to work alongside
Well,
them.
like I said,
Right back at you.
you guys do some terrific work. We appreciate it. Keep digging. Keep digging on
you.
everything. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
After the break, this week's Leadership Spotlight.